Awesome. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me this morning, afternoon, or night, or whenever you're watching it. Get started. So, this is one of my favorite talks. It's one of those topics that is really important for us as practitioners and also as humans, but really rarely gets addressed. Um, a bit about myself. I'm Guy Siegel. I've been in the tech world for quite a while. Um, this picture is happened to be taken a month before COVID. So yeah, it's been quite a few years, and a few gray hairs have been added. But I started as a software developer, and after about a decade of that, I discovered UX, I discovered design, and I was really lucky to make that jump over from development to design. In addition to mentoring on ADP lists, I currently lead the design system team at Thomson Reuters, where we're building the one design system to rule them all that's going to support Thomson Reuters' 150 products. And a big part of that work is, of course, working with other people. And that's when interesting things start to happen. And why is that? When we look at ourselves, we know what our own thoughts, experiences, emotions, desires, and expectations are. But when we start interacting with another person, when we enter a relationship, whether it's with a colleague, a boss, a friend, a partner, things change. And as an introverted extrovert, working with people is the most exciting part of my job, but also one that can really drain my energy. As someone else put it, and that is really true. But why is that? Because every time we interact with someone else, we tend to skip a really important step or hope that it happens on its own. And that is setting expectations. So instead, we guess what those expectations are. And we not only become mind readers, but we expect others to become mind readers as well and read our mind. And what happens when their actions clash with our expectations? That's when we get those negative emotions. That person isn't really interested in collaborating with us, or that person is such a jerk. We ascribe a meaning to to their actions, based on our assumptions. And those meanings are what stays with us, and they cause the negative emotions. It's not that their actions are necessarily bad, it's the meanings that we attribute to them. It's the intent we attribute to them that is the negative emotion. Before we continue, I'd like you to take a second or a few seconds and think about a time someone at work made you feel angry, upset, insignificant, or misunderstood. And I really want to use this, you to use this as sort of to ground yourself as we're going through this presentation, as I'm talking about the different aspects of conflict and how to resolve it. Think about it. Really helps if you think about an actual incident that happened to you, because that will help you think about some of it possibly in a certain way. And really try to think about all those details. What did that person say? How did you feel in the moment? How did you react? What do you wish you would have done differently? So I'll give you a few seconds to sort of think about that. You can even write it down if you want to. Don't worry, I'm not going to ask anyone to share. But it really helps if you have kind of an incident in mind as we're going through the different topics. So what are the topics for this talk? I'm going to start with the root cause behind conflicts between people. I'll share tips on how to address existing conflicts, how to prevent future conflicts from happening, and I'll end with a deeper dive into one of the best tools out there for resolving conflict between people, and that's giving feedback. Now, since this talk used to be a 2-hour workshop, I'm going to go somewhat quicker through some of the sections, mainly 2 and 3, because I want to get to the meat of the session with the feedback part. So if I skip something, if I don't mention something, feel free to ask about it, but everything will be available to you in the slides that we're going to share afterwards. So you're not going to lose anything. Some of it is a bit content heavy, and I know that's not the best thing for a presentation, but don't worry. I compensate with a lot of images and references to pop culture. Hopefully that will take care of it. So let's understand why conflicts happen. What makes the other person, quote unquote, difficult? There could be a multitude of reasons why that happens, why another person is being difficult, as we say. They have their own worries, they have their own concerns. They might be under pressure from their boss. It could actually be something that you have no idea about, something in their personal life, or something that you're just not privy to. We don't know. The key is to remember that this should not be a battle. This is not you versus them. Because at the root of it, the thing that everyone wants most is to feel that they matter and they want to be heard. Everyone wants this. And this is something that is at the root cause of almost any conflict out there. And when you understand what it is they need, when we make space for them and we let them feel that they matter, that's how we can resolve that conflict. And that leads us directly into different approaches in resolving a conflict. Before I get there, this is not gospel. This is not the one truth. These are just observations that I've had throughout my career. And some of them I experienced myself. Some of them I read, in books or in articles. I just want to share them with you and give you some tools for you to think about things or consider things, maybe in ways that you haven't before. The first thing that's really important is you need to be open to receive what they have to say. And this is where practicing empathy and comes into play. And that's something that as designers and people who work with other people and create things for other people, and hopefully we do it in a way that takes the needs of those people into consideration, we should be fairly versed in. So be open to receive what they have to say. Make sure that you treat them with respect and really make an effort to understand their point of view. And as I'm going to repeat it again later, understanding someone's perspective doesn't mean you have to agree with it, but give them the space to express it. Active listening is an important skill that isn't really used enough because we're usually busy waiting for the other person to stop talking so we can say the really important thing we had to say. But in order to give that person the space that they require to open up or to express themselves, we need to be able to receive. And there's a lot of different ways for you to listen to them and try to understand, not just let them speak, but also try to understand, is there something they're not saying? Is there something that is the actual cause behind it? Yes, there's some guessing here, but at the very least, try to find out what they're trying to say. Maybe they're not being very articulate about it, but there's always something that is bothering them. And as we saw, there's kind of like a root cause of they don't feel being heard enough, or they don't feel like what they want to say matters. Make sure you're not either knowingly or unknowingly close yourself up to a resolution. Your attitude should be focused on finding that solution and making that relationship stronger with that other person. So really examine how you approach it. Are you biased against them? Be aware of that bias. Try to put yourself in their shoes and try to imagine how they see it. What would they say about you? They might say you're You're such a difficult person. Would they be right to say so? Consider their perspective. I have a confession to make. I'm a very bad mind reader. I'm terrible at it. And actually, in fact, very few people are. And I assume most of you aren't great at reading minds either. The best way to know how the other person sees things is to ask them. Ask them. Ask them, how would you resolve this? Ask them, what would you do if you had your say? Make sure you validate that they have a point of view. And again, as I said earlier, acknowledging that they have a different perspective and a different way of seeing the world doesn't mean you have to agree with it. But at the very least, you surface it. And once you surface it, you can work with it. There are two reasons why it's much better to talk to the other person in private, one-on-one. First, they don't feel they need to have to perform in front of other people. That is really important, especially when you have a conflict with someone who has a team, someone who's a manager. And you know that if you do it in a room where they have people from their team, they sometimes feel they even close up even more, and they have a sense they need to protect themselves and show strength, whatever that means. So if you meet with them one-on-one, it can really help with resolving that. And the other reason is that it won't affect other people. It won't infect other people with their negativity. You want to really contain it in one place. And I found that one of the best tools is give the other person feedback. This really allows you to share what is working for you and what isn't working for you in a very calm way that doesn't cause the other person to become defensive. And I'll get to that in a few minutes. So how do you prevent future conflicts? Where there's no 100% foolproof guarantee that things will never go sour. In fact, any unchecked relationship will inevitably need some maintenance as you go. But there are some tips to preemptively put your best foot forward when you start working with someone new. We tend to focus in our work on users. Those are the people who will be using the product or service we're creating. And we have a lot of empathy for them. But we sometimes forget to apply the same empathy towards all the other people between us and the users. So in order to avoid friction, we should employ the similar methods we use when we design for users by designing a relationship with the people we work with. How does that work? Well, when you start working with a new stakeholder or a teammate, interview them. It doesn't need to be a formal interview. It can be a casual coffee chat. But what you're trying to do is understand what their perspective is. This is essentially you're doing the same things that I mentioned earlier about trying to resolve a conflict, but you're trying to uncover those things before a conflict happens. You want to find out what they're trying to get out of the project, what's keeping them up at night. That's a really common question I ask a stakeholder. What's keeping you up at night? That way I know what they're concerned about, what they're worried about. Keep them in the loop. Remember that, the root cause, people want to feel heard. That's how you continuously do that. Keep them in the loop. And when you notice a behavior you want to reinforce, you want them to repeat, praise them for it. The feedback framework that I'll teach in a few minutes covers positive feedback as well as constructive feedback. Be very loud and do it early with any red flags you notice. This is a very, UX process 101. Measure and course correct if you need to. Now we get to the meat of the presentation. And this is going to be a simple framework for giving someone else feedback. I didn't invent this framework. You can find a lot of different variations of it in a lot of different books. But this is the one that I've been using and teaching others how to use. Before that, Irene has a couple of 2 quick polls for you. So the first poll you enjoy receiving performance feedback? Simple yes or no. Very, very curious to see the answers to this. And then we have a second short poll as well. Do you enjoy giving performance feedback? And I'm going to talk about the results of these two in a second. Awesome. So let's look at the results of the polls. Interesting. So we definitely have more people here who enjoy receiving performance feedback. And that's actually a much higher result than I expected. But we have fewer people who enjoy giving performance feedback. And that is not surprising, because what happens is many times the reason we don't like giving that performance feedback as much is because when we think about feedback or giving feedback to another person, a lot of times this is what we imagine. At some point, we've been giving feedback in a really bad way, and we got hurt or even humiliated. In fact, the word feedback, this is an article that came out last week. The word feedback induces so much fear in some people that, some companies are even changing the word feedback because they think it's too harsh, and instead are using the word feed forward. I really hope it doesn't make it into the dictionary. So what do we do when we need to give someone feedback for a performance review, for example? We use a method that I'll refer to in a nice way as the poop sandwich. You start with a compliment, then you unload all the terrible things, and you finish up with another compliment. And that's a really bad way to give feedback. When you hear the compliments, you know what's coming and you're bracing yourself for all the negative stuff. And the compliments are more of an insult by that point. And I say no to the poop sandwich. The reason why that feedback misses the point is because it's all about the past. So with a show of hands or virtual hands, think about these questions. Have you made a mistake in the last month? Any mistake? I can see a few hands, yeah, not surprising. And if you're like the rest of us, you'll probably say, yeah, I've made mistakes. The second question, and again, show hands, did you intend to make those mistakes? And I would assume that most of you would say, no, of course I didn't. The problem is that we can't really change what happened in the past. The moment you switch your focus to the future, that's when you free yourself to something that you and the other person can do something about. This is the important slide of the presentation. The purpose of performance communications, which feedback is a part of, is to encourage effective future behavior. This is the really important thing, encouraging effective future behavior. So here's that simple framework for giving feedback that encourages effective future behavior. It can be applied to anyone, anywhere, at work, at home, with family, with friends, with partners. it really eliminates that accusatory aspect of feedback that some of us received in the past, the one that says you were bad. And it does it in 4 easy steps. So, step number 1, ask permission. Essentially, you're asking the other person for consent. Hey, can I give you some feedback? That's it. If the other person says yes, we continue to step 2. If they say no, we stop. And the reason is we want to make sure that they're in the right mindset to receive that feedback. If they're not in the right mindset, nothing you say afterwards is going to matter because they're not receiving it. They're not listening. If they say no, back off, try again later. So that's step 1. You ask for permission or consent to give them feedback. Step 2, state a behavior. This usually starts with the words when you. I'll give an example. When you come prepared to the client meeting, or when you came in late every day of this week. And like I said, this framework is also good outside of work. You can say, when you leave dirty dishes in the sink. Behavior is things we can see, things we can hear, things that exist in the world. Words you say, how you say them, facial expressions, how your body is. Deliverables, that's things you can see in the world, wireframes, a research report. You'll see that it doesn't include an attitude or a motivation. This step is really important because it only deals with that behavior that can be observed. It's not about our interpretation. Remember, in the very early parts of the discussion, I said what happens is we have certain expectations. We see a behavior that doesn't meet those expectations, and we interpret it as a bad intent. So, for example, if we see, let's say, a bad way to do it is we see someone is looking at their phone in a meeting, and we interpret it as, oh, that person is checked out. That person is not engaged. That's not a behavior. The behavior was were on their phone. That's something we can see. That's something we can't really argue about. We didn't see them disengage. We saw them on their phone. The disengaged part is our interpretation. So a bad way of giving feedback is, oh, I see you're really disengaged in meetings. They can say, what are you talking about? I'm not. Because we don't know what's behind them being on their phone. Could be their child is sick and they're waiting for a call from the doctor. But if we only keep it into the behavior we can observe, when you were in the meeting, you were on your phone, that is something that is really a lot harder for them to say, no, I wasn't. So that's step 2. This is the behavior. And the behavior is really setting ourselves up to step 3. And step 3 is about the impact of that behavior. This is the follow-up. The other person did something, and that behavior had an impact on us, on you, on anyone else. This is where you can bring emotions into play. That's okay. This is not about observable behavior anymore. This is about what that behavior caused. So I'll use the examples I already gave. When you come prepared to the client meeting, that's the behavior. You came prepared to the client meeting. That was the behavior. The impact, you make the team look good. Or when you came in late every day of this week, that is something that can be observed. The impact, the team thinks you don't care about them. So I don't know if that person cares about the team or not. I'm not going to assume whether they do or not. But the impact of them coming in late is we think you don't care. We think you're checked out. When you leave dirty dishes in the sink, that's an observed behavior. The impact, I feel you don't respect me and expect me to do all the work by myself. Again, I don't know if my partner respects me or not. I don't know if them leaving dirty dishes in the sink means that they don't respect me. but that's how I feel. So I said the behavior, I stated the observed behavior, and now I say this is what it causes, whether it could be positive and could be negative. And then we end up with step 4. This is where we're looking into the future. This is the behavior we want to encourage. So if it's a positive thing, like I said, when you come prepared to the client meeting, that's the behavior, the impact. You make the team look good. And now, how do we encourage that behavior again? You can say thanks. You can say keep it up. We want them to do it again. So we said, this is what you did. This was the impact. Keep doing it. That's awesome. When it's negative, for example, when you were late every day of this week, the team thinks you don't care about them. Could you change that? Can you do that differently? We want them to change it, right? We want to encourage a different future behavior. Going back to that example of the dirty dishes, when you leave dirty dishes in the sink, I feel you don't respect me and expect me to do all the work. What can you do differently? Or can you not do it again? Right? Can you change that? This is where we can also have an advanced level where you have a bit more trust and you know the person a bit more. You can sort of engage them or work with them collaboratively to ask them, okay, how can you make it better? It's also a good way, let's say you have a team member, someone who reports to you, that you want them to figure out a different way of doing something so they don't have the same, it was a negative impact, you want them to change it, but you want them to take ownership on the solution so they commit to that solution. Like any framework, and again, the 4 parts are ask for permission, state and observe behavior in the world, say what the impact is. And again, the impact here can be emotional, can be any sort of impact that caused. And you end up with either encouraging it because you want that to continue. That's the positive behavior. Or if you want them to change it, you can tell them, please change it. Or you can involve them in how would you do it differently next time. And like any framework, getting this right and feeling comfortable using it takes a lot of practice. I really recommend you watch this recording with a real scenario in mind. It can be the one that you thought of earlier. And you can think about, how would that incident didn't happen, that someone made me feel bad at work. Write down the 4 steps, the asking for permission, stating the behavior, stating the impact, and since it was bad, how do you encourage a different future behavior? You can write it all down and think about how you would give that feedback to that person. You can even role play with someone to build your confidence, and feel free to book a session with myself on ADP List. We can sort of work through that. And with that, opening it up for questions.
Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Having some technical difficulties. Thank you so much, Guy. It was a great presentation. I was actually so focused on it that it took me a second to appear on the stage. It was super, super nice. And there's so many questions on the chat that I'm going to just start with the one that have the most votes.
Absolutely.
So let's just go directly to it. And this is, let me refresh. This is a question from Amanda. I'm going to put it on a stage.
Mm-hmm.
How does this work with people in positions of power? For example, if your conflict is with someone who is multiple levels above you and you're not on an equal playing field.
This is a really good question. Thank you, Amanda. Theoretically, the same framework can work with anyone, right? This is because it really focuses on the observed behavior. and not on your interpretation, right? The impact is there to sometimes people do something and they have no idea that it caused something bad, right? That the impact was negative. And if you ideally you're dealing with someone who once they hear the impact, they care enough that they want to change it. Now, hopefully you know what kind of person you're dealing with. If it's someone that you don't think will care, this is not going to change things for them. It does make sense to go and do some preparation. So first of all, write down that feedback. Like, this is really where practice is important, because you want to practice it. You want to refine it. You want to make sure you're doing it the right way. Practice with another person. Try to talk to someone who knows that person a bit better. Maybe someone who reports to them, if you're comfortable talking to them, or someone who knows, who maybe was in a similar situation. You want to do a bit of kind of like a, intelligence gathering, and figure out, would what I have to say land on, listening ears. I had a similar situation. It wasn't actually a person in position of power. It was a peer at the same level. And I really wanted to give them feedback, but I talked to their manager about it, and they said, you know what? I don't think it's going to make a difference. It's actually going to make things worse. Sometimes we deal with people that will not be open to listening. But hopefully it's not it's not such a scenario. Thank you for the question, Amanda.
That was great. I want to go directly to the next one so we can cover as many questions as possible.
Absolutely.
The next one is from Sayana. I hope that I did that right, but sorry. 1 second. I'm trying to bring it to the stage. Well, on the meantime, I'm just gonna read it to you. How can extroverted leaders demonstrate empathy towards introverted team members to create an inclusive and balanced work environment that encourages open communication? How can organizations foster an empathetic workplace culture that supports both?
That's a wonderful question. So a bit of a background on this. So this specific framework that I'm teaching, those 4 steps, like I said, I didn't invent it. It's a very common one, but the wording that I use, they're taken from a really good book called The Effective Manager. The Effective Manager talks about 4 main sort of skills or activities that managers need to possess in order to have a good engagement and good being able to work well with their team. And this giving feedback framework is one of them. As a leader, the best way to do it is lead by example, is model those things. So what they recommend in the book is, when you start working with a team, start giving positive feedback. So those, reinforce the behaviors you want to encourage people to repeat, and only give positive feedback for at least 3 weeks. So by doing that, you're training your team to recognize the structure. You teach them, by using it, you teach them how to give feedback, how to give that, how you encourage positive future behavior. And you show them that you're not just telling them how to do it, you're actually practicing it. After those 3 weeks, you've established a bit of a trust with your team, and you can start pulling in not the negative, but the constructive feedback, the one that you want to, okay, there was a certain behavior, this was the impact, I'd like you to change it. I'd like you to change the behavior. But it's all about modeling. It's all about showing your team that you're doing it. And a really great thing is, if someone from a team comes to you and wants to give you feedback, and they ask you, hey, can I give you feedback? Unless like something horrible happened and you can't listen at that moment, always say yes. Show them, again, sort of tying it to Amanda's previous question, show them that you are someone who is open to receiving that feedback. Thank you.
I love it. Dealing with example. That's amazing. Uh, awesome. We're gonna go to the next one already. And this one says, what if the way they share their opinion with us is always cynical and mostly mean?
Mm. As a very cynical person, um, I would definitely say this is a terrible way of giving feedback. Um, there's no, when you're giving feedback to another person, the cynicism and being mean just undermines it. This is actually a really good um, opportunity for you to give that person feedback, because there's an observed behavior, right? And actually, if you look at your sentence, there's a bit of an assumption here, right? There's a bit of an interpretation. The mean part, right? Oh, that person is mean. That person says mean things. That person's opinion is mean. That's an interpretation. Maybe they do intend to be mean, maybe they don't, but that's the impact, right? And you want to give them that feedback. Hey, can I give you some feedback? When you say these things and use the exact words they say, we hear it as very cynical and quite offensive. So please don't do that. That way you let them know that maybe they didn't even know that they were offending you, right? A lot of people use cynicism, myself included, as a defense mechanism, right? But we don't want to be completely vulnerable. Maybe they didn't even know that they were being mean to you in the process. So this is perfect example for feedback you could give them. Thank you. That's a really good question.
Thank you. Great. We're gonna go to the next one with the next votes. Let me refresh. And this is from Cara. And she's asking you, what do you do with information you gain from listening, and how do you handle or prevent assumptions, specifically incorrect assumptions? That's a good
Hmm.
question as well.
Um, I like to. So it happens quite a lot. Um, for myself, leading a design system team. Design systems is one of those areas that are really sometimes can feel like a thankless job. And you usually hear from people when things are not working, right? When something is broken, you get to hear from people. And they don't come as often when things are working well. And I do get to hear a lot of those assumptions and sort of declaration and statements. Oh, the design system is broken and those kind of things. What I like to do is go from generalizations into specifics. Okay, give me an example. Tell me what you're talking about. And when you go from generalizations, the thing is not working, into, oh, in this case, we had a bug. That already changes the conversation. Then you're addressing actual things instead of big declarations. And that's how I always like to address that, is by, let's talk about the specifics, because that usually takes it down from the sky is falling into, oh, we have a list of things that are not working for us. Great. Let's look how we can prioritize it and work with you to fix it. Like, that's where, when you have the specifics, you can actually put a plan in motion to start addressing those things. And it's not a big, unknown, scary thing. Thank you. That's a really good question.
Well, thanks for your insights. Let's go to the next one from Greg. And this one asks, what have you done to avoid a tone with your good feedback that may come across as overly critical?
Hmm. That's where practice comes into play, really. Um, the good feedback is, again, it should become second nature with practice. Like, hey, um, when you gave that answer in a meeting to the client, they loved it, and yeah, thanks. Keep up the good work. Like, it should be as natural. And I know we don't. necessarily, or we don't often, a lot of times, again, when you think about feedback, we think about the corrective feedback, but we should practice and become as the positive, the reinforcing feedback should become second nature to us. That we say it as it's going to become as it's one sentence. Hey, when you pick up that trash from the ground, it helps makes people feel better in the office. Thanks, like that, as common as that. Um, it should really, I think, when it sounds or it may come across as critical, is when it feels too mechanical. But again, that's really where the practice, the trying it over and over, and you don't have to pick the lowest stake scenarios possible. Like, someone brought you something from the printer, like those kind of things. Start practicing giving people feedback in that scenario. Someone went, you were in a meeting and someone brought you coffee from downstairs. Those kind of things. Give them positive feedback. And that's where you start. Like, it's not, people will also get used to you giving feedback. Hopefully that answers the question.
Awesome. Okay, I'll go to the next one. And this is from Michael. And the question is, what if you get permissions for feedback, but the attitude or position is on a defensive state?
That's a really good question, and this is really where the second step, the state the behavior, that's what is really missing from a lot of feedback. Like, every time that I got feedback that you know really left me wanting to leave the office and never come back, that was when it wasn't using the it didn't state the behavior. It was only the impact. It was not even the impact. It was the interpretation, the assumption. It was you're really disengaged from work. I can like, this is where, when it's only about emotions, this is where I can say, no, you're not, and I can start an argument about that. And that usually means that, in this case, if the other person has that attitude, like, oh, I know what's coming, they're going to say something terrible about me, because people take it, personally. When I tell, when if you say to someone, hey, you really, like, you suck at collaboration because I don't know what, they didn't show up on time to a workshop, or they, for whatever reason, they said no to an idea. Doesn't necessarily mean that they suck at collaboration. But if you only talk about the impact or the interpretation of what they did, oh, you're a terrible collaborator. That's, people take it personally, and there's no reason not to. Like, it sounds like a personal attack. And that's where people become defensive. So if people are not used to receiving the stated behavior part of the feedback, they will be defensive, and that makes a lot of sense. So make sure that you like, exercise people to listen to those parts, the stated behavior and the impact, and then they don't have anything to be defensive about. Like they, I don't know, they said no to something. That's not something they can say, no, I didn't, because it was an observed behavior. They can talk about, they can then say, okay, oh, I understand why you thought I am a bad collaborator as a result of that. It's the reason the stated behavior is so important is not just, in addition to stating something that is harder to be defensive about, it's also really good for the encouraging the future behavior. Because if someone tells me, you're a really bad collaborator, can you please not do that? I have no idea what I did that person made that person think I'm a bad collaborator. But if they tell me, hey, when you say no to all the ideas that are in the meeting, it seems like you're a bad collaborator, so please don't do that. Now I know what not to do. Now I know what is the behavior that gave other people the impression that I'm a bad collaborator, and I know what to change, or I know what to repeat if it's something they want me to repeat. Thank you. That's an awesome question.
I completely resonate with your answer. I think this is a great tip. Um, it's funny enough, I also hear some similarities with how to train dogs, but I think it's just a great advice. And there's a question here who's been rising all the way up from both. So it's from Shirley. And she wonders, what happens if after delivering the feedback of how you feel, the receiver interprets it as you being too sensitive?
Hmm. Um, that is a really good question. Um, I must say I haven't seen that happen, because again, this is when you state the observed behavior, it usually, and again, assuming you don't say something like this, hey, when you when you don't erase the whiteboard after our meeting, I feel like you hate me, and I feel like I'm not a member of the team, and I feel like you want to fire me. That's probably a bit of a, an exaggeration of the impact. So maybe then there's a mismatch of saying, oh, like, I just didn't erase the board. Why did you take it that far? But usually there's going to be, and again, this is where it makes sense to, if you're not sure if you might come across as too sensitive, practice with someone else first. Say, hey, does this make sense to you? Hey, when you don't erase the board, others have to do it, and it make them seem like you don't care about us as a team. I think that's a very, very fair impact as a result. Might be, some people may think you're too sensitive, but the important thing here is that if this person is, interested in maintaining good relationship and wants to and understands that, oh, there was an impact, even if I think the impact on you was way beyond what you should have felt, I can't really argue with how you felt. The only thing I can do is change my behavior. And even if I think, wow, you're so sensitive, do I want to keep making you feel bad? If the answer is yes, then I don't want to work with that person ever again. But assuming the answer is, I don't want you to feel bad again, yeah, okay, sure, I'll erase the whiteboard. Ideally, the other person understands that they had a negative impact and you told them exactly what they need to do differently next time. Thank you,
Thank you.
Shirley.
Thank you, Guy. I also appreciate the part of getting feedback on how to give feedback. Let's see. Let's go to. We still have some minutes, so we can still go through some more questions. This is a question again from Greg. How do you vary your advice when communicating across different generations?
Um, if by advice you mean this framework, it doesn't need to change. Because I've been taught a variation of this framework, something very, very similar, in a workshop that had people from ages 14 to 70 plus. It's a very simple framework of I haven't seen any sort of generation have trouble with it. It was more like, some people might have an issue with it, but that's due to a certain personality type, for example, if at all. But it's a very, very easy to understand uh, because people see the value for themselves. A lot of times when you try to teach someone a process or a new way of doing something, if they see the value for themselves, for example, in this case, the value for me is, let's say someone is teaching me this framework, the value for me is, wow, I'd love to be given feedback like that and not in a terrible way like I did before. And that is a huge value for me. I want, and one of the reasons I love giving this talk is I wish more and more people practice and learn how to give feedback like that, because I think it's going to make, I'm going to exaggerate now, but going to make the world better, because we'll be able to resolve those things. We'll be able to move beyond, oh, you know, my partner not remembering my our anniversary and not bringing me flowers. Oh, they hate me. And instead of me saying to them, oh, why do you hate me so much, which again is an interpretation, I can say, hey, when you didn't bring flowers yesterday on our anniversary, um, it made me feel really bad and made me feel like you don't care about this relationship. That gives an opening to a conversation. It's not, hey, you really don't care about this relationship. And they say, yes, I do. What are you talking about? And that's an argument. But hey, when you didn't bring flowers, it made me feel bad. They can say, oh, I had a horrible day and I lost track of time and the flower shop was closed by the time I got there. That's it. It's not about them hating me. It's about them not bringing the flowers. And so once people understand the value of this framework on how it can be better for them, I want others to give me feedback this way. They see that, oh yeah, it's also easy for me to give that. It takes a lot of, like, putting aside that earlier question by Amanda about giving someone to a few levels higher than you, giving feedback to that person. In most other cases, it removes that fear of, oh, I really do hate giving that person negative feedback, because this removes the emotion from it. This makes it a lot more concrete. And I've seen people of all ages and generations really connect with that. So I don't vary the advice. I use the same framework, and it seems to be working well. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you. The next one, I really, really like the question. I'm going to put it in the stage now. How do you resolve conflicts between two team members when you find yourself in the middle?
Oh, um, this might require a bit of a different thing. But actually, you can use some of this framework as well. So this is not an example. You can start with, there's a lot of different things you can do here. So if you have two team members and there's a conflict between them, and let's say they don't have the right tools to resolve it themselves, right? It happens. You can, first of all, you can do several things. One of them is you can, again, give them feedback. When you fight with that other person, or when you say this about the other person, or when you don't send, when you don't send the right files to that person, for whatever reason, I'm not going to interpret that, this is the impact. You're creating a rift in our team. And I'm going to give the similar feedback to the other person. So first of all, I want them to know that something they're doing has a negative impact. Maybe they're not aware of it. But let's say they are aware of it. They are aware that there's some that they have that impact. I can bring them both in together, and I can ask them to talk about the observed behavior. I can sort of try to guide them to give each other feedback about the observed behavior. I actually did something similar. I had two team members who were not getting along at all. And I've been hearing like complaints from other people, and people would come to me, and it was kind of like dealing with it was really bad, and it was really taxing emotionally. And I asked them each separately. I said, okay, what's bugging you, in front of the other person? And I asked the other person, don't speak, just listen. I kind of used the elements from earlier in the presentation, not the framework, but the resolution of conflicts. I forced one person to really say what they had to say, essentially doing kind of like the other person's job for them and trying to surface what's not working, where they feel that they're not being heard, all those things. And then I did the same thing with the other person. So each person got to speak uninterrupted about what's bugging them, what's annoying them, and the impact that they felt. And those two people, once they see that, And again, it's not, they never had that conversation. But once they were aware of, okay, that's the impact I have on the other person, I don't want to have that impact on the other person, I don't want to have the impact on the team. That's where you, like, they're starting to work together to find a solution.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so
But it's
much.
not an easy question.
I see many things that you just mentioned reflected on a course I had about mediating conflicts. So definitely really, really nice tips. I think we have time for one more.
Sure.
Um, let's see. Salvatore is asking that you mentioned a book initially, and I don't know if you talk now. Is that the book that you were talking about management?
It's called The Effective Manager. If you Google The Effective Manager book, you're probably going to find it. It's a short one, like the, but it's amazing book. Really teaches. It talks about the four main skills that a manager needs: giving feedback, excuse me, conducting one-on-ones, um, delegating, and coaching.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the reference. And probably we need to start closing things because people will migrate to a different speaker session. But I just want to thank you again, Guy, for being here and sharing with us this amazing presentation. I think everyone enjoyed a lot. There were so many questions. So I
I
also love
really
your
appreciate it.
slides.
Yeah. Thank you for spending time with me.
Have a good day. Bye, everyone.